Please welcome the co-founder and CEO of the Commons Project, Paul Meyer, in conversation with Skift airline reporter, Edward Russell.
Hi, Paul. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
Excellent. I'm Ned Russell with Skift, the airlines reporter. Paul, of course, is with the Commons Project. Interesting, going to have a fun discussion about the emerging area of digital health passports this afternoon with Paul. You know, this is something as we sit here on the verge of vaccinations becoming widespread enough for travel to restart in a lot of places. You know, we're all sort of eagerly looking at what is needed to enable that. And this new area of digital health passports is something that a lot of us expect to become commonplace in our lives, travel lives at least, going forward. So, you know, Paul, maybe you could start out just telling us a little bit about how these health passports sort of work.
Well, it's evolving really quickly. And I think, though, let me just sort of step back and say this is fundamentally about health. Obviously, the audience here is very focused on travel. This event is very focused on travel. Our foundation, our roots are in health. And the approach that we've tried to take, we launched the Commons Project Foundation almost 3 years ago out of the Rockefeller Foundation, really with this idea of building a new kind of nonprofit entity to be able to build and operate digital services for the common good. First and foremost, focusing on empowering people with their data, beginning with health data. And so long before COVID, long before I knew much of anything about travel other than being a traveler, we were focused on building tools to let people collect and store and share their health information on a platform called Common Pass. And so in some ways, again, we're very focused, and we're going to talk a lot today about airlines and borders and all sorts of kind of airline travel related use cases. But ultimately, this really has to start with health, because fundamentally we're talking about how do individuals get access to their health information, control it for healthcare purposes, and also potentially use that information to be able to do things like get on airplanes, get on, cross land borders, enter countries. But I think there's, one of the things that, since we first announced Common Pass, since we did our first trials in the fall with United, between London and New York, and with Cathay between Hong Kong and Singapore, we were at that point, it was before vaccines had been approved. And those first trials in the fall really were about, I get tested before I get on an airplane, show it to the airplane, show it to the border authority when I land, and go on my way. And we're still doing those. We're done 6 or 8 trials in the last week. But the one really significant shift has been the advent of vaccines, which is obviously incredibly exciting news for the world.
Right.
And what the implications of that shift are, is really kind of a shift to healthcare. Because if you think about it, like if there's a testing requirement, to get on a plane, I mean, we launched our production service today with JetBlue into Aruba. We announced that this morning.
Yeah.
Aruba has a testing requirement. If I want to get on a JetBlue flight and fly to Aruba, I'm going to go get tested at an approved lab. And getting tested is sort of related to my journey because it's a requirement of the Aruban government.
Right.
If I'm getting vaccinated, I'm not getting vaccinated to get on an airplane. I'm getting vaccinated to get vaccinated. And now, a month or a year later, I may want to, I may need to access that information to sort of show my status, but I'm not going to use like a travel app to sort of, store my vaccination record.
Absolutely.
That's something that needs to come later.
Definitely. And we actually have a sort of an interesting flow chart looking at the process that is going to essentially works behind these apps. Like you say, you've got your health data, whether it's a lab or a vaccine registry, going, connecting to the app, and that connects to the airlines and the governments that are managing their borders and everything. You bring up an interesting point, the JetBlue Aruba partnership that the Commons Project launched today. And that really is, it's one of the first first examples of one of these digital health passports being in common use. Can you tell us a bit about that and how that is working? You launched it yesterday.
Yeah, we did. And to be clear, this is a production launch. This isn't a trial. This is now all passengers flying from on JetBlue to Aruba now can get tested, use Common Pass. and it's not just a system that connects your, the test to the airline. It's also integrated into the Aruba border control system,
right?
Which means when you land in Aruba, and it's actually integrated scalably through an API, which means when you land in Aruba, you go to a fast lane where you basically effectively pre-cleared because you demonstrated through Common Pass that you'd already met the health testing requirements of Aruba. So you basically can get to the beach faster. And so again, it's a full end-to-end production service from the data source, in this case labs, through the airline workflow into integration with the border control system, and the government of Aruba accepting this credential, this sort of certification, effectively, the Common Pass says, hey, we've looked at Paul's tests. He got tested in a way that satisfies Aruba's requirements. So that's the way. And again, I will say, going back to my trial, I mean, I should emphasize this point. This is not a trial. This is now a full production system that you can every passenger has access to. And we're launching many of those now production systems. And there's a very big difference between a trial and actually a full production deployment integrated via API into things like airline systems and government systems. I think the other thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just saying, you're very right that there is a difference between a trial and a full production system, especially when it comes to these apps. And that seems to be one of the big stumbling blocks. Today, Cathay Pacific also mentioned that they trialed Common Pass app, and now that they are fully supportive of using that as a digital health passport to enter and exit Hong Kong. But I noted in the release they said we're fully supportive of it. It seems like what they really need is the government there to take, make a decision. So what has to happen on that front for move from the airlines trialing it into these production systems that you mentioned? So
one of the things we've done this really in partnership with the World Economic Forum, is created something called the Common Trust Network, right? Which is really a broad coalition of governments, of healthcare organizations, of other partners committed to this fundamental idea of empowering people with access to their health information using standards, kind of open, interoperable standards. So one, they can improve their health, and two, they can improve their status. So we're actually at the end of our session, we're going to be making a major announcement that a very large U.S. healthcare retailer is the first retailer to fully commit to this health card standard that we've been developing under the Vaccine Credential Initiative with many key technology and healthcare stakeholders in the U.S. So we're building this ecosystem of trusted healthcare organizations and institutions who are willing to make their data available in these standards. Conversely, we're also welcoming and inviting governments, and we're engaged with any. Aruba actually was the first government, actually in December, said, sign us up. We're sort of firmly committed to joining the Common Trust Network and accepting Common Pass, and it went live today, right?
Yes.
So, but there are many other countries that we're deeply engaged with, but let me just pause a moment to explain what that means.
Okay.
Like everyone's getting really focused on this app or that app. It is. The app has nothing to do with it. Ultimately, this is about trust. If you put yourself in a government policymaker's shoes, right? Clearly governments want to, especially governments with tourist-dependent economies, want to open up. They want travelers, but their duty is to protect their people and protect the health of their population. Right. And so, as those policymakers, specifically ministers of health, who are trying to make these policy decisions, saying, okay, well, maybe, and they're constantly looking at prevalence rates and emergence of new variants and all the sort of public health and epidemiological trends. They want to be able to say, okay, look, we would like to open up, but we feel like maybe if we require testing, or hopefully soon, if people have been vaccinated, we're going to be comfortable opening up and allowing travel to resume.
Yeah.
The problem is, if they can't trust the data, I mean, you've seen this, all the stories about, fake certificates on the black market and blah, blah, blah. The problem is, as a policymaker, a government policymaker, if you can't trust the fake certificate, then you can't, it's much harder to actually implement that policy. But, look, a QR code in an app from an unknown source is no more reliable than a piece of paper that someone's waving in from some random lab.
Absolutely.
And so what we're really trying to do, and Common Pass is just a manifestation of this, But really, the Common Trust Network is about building a network of trusted data sources, be it the LabCorps and the Quests that we're already connected to, or others, or we're starting to work with governments and national registries where the government is either creating their own health pass or has a registry of vaccination records or lab results. And so then the destination, the government or anyone else, can say, hey, yeah, great that someone showed up with this app, but I actually want to know who was the source, what was the lab, what kind of certification, because that is what's needed to give me the trust and the confidence to actually be able to open up and allow travel to resume.
See, you bring up an interesting question. You said, I mean, you guys are engaged with multiple governments in terms of determining this. But of course, if you have to do this on a one-on-one basis with every government around the world, that's going to be quite a Herculean effort. One of our listeners asked, are you working any multilateral agreements? For example, I read today that the EU is looking at a new, green digital certificate to enable travel within that bloc. Are you working with them? Do you think a multilateral agreement is sort of the way things have to go? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're engaged with the EU. We're had extensive discussions with them as recently as yesterday. We're engaged with a number of governments, but we're also engaged with kind of networks of governments. For example, we're have been working very closely with the East Africa community, the 6 countries of East Africa. They were actually one of the first groups of countries that we began to work with. And what's interesting about that is they have pre-existing trust, right? They trust each other. They've committed to joining the Common Trust Network as well. So we are absolutely both working with individual countries. We completed trials over the weekend with Japan. We've been engaged with Japan for a long time. They are very keen on hosting the Olympics. And you can't host the Olympics unless you know that you can let athletes come and that they're going to be tested and or vaccinated. So we are absolutely both having direct conversations. We're also the UK government issued a global travel task force report in the fall. They're about to release an updated version. The Minister of Transport, Grant Shapps, spoke about this in the House of Commons last week. The UK has signaled their interest in helping catalyze. And actually, they hold the presidency of the G7 this year, and they've expressed a desire to help the world adopt sort of a common framework and model for trusted exchange of health information. So we're working bilaterally. We're also working with some of these multilateral groups of countries to come together around this.
It's interesting you mentioned the UK and the G7. That came up when Paul Abbott from Amex's talk earlier today at the conference. They even spoke of getting sort of this idea of trust of health data at the next G7 summit in the UK. Is this something that you guys are working on with other organizations? Of course, Paul Abbott's at Amex. IATA is developing its Travel Pass. There are other apps out there. It seems like developing these standards is something that you guys all really should work together on, because a single standard is going to help everybody. So
absolutely. But let's break down what that means, right? First, let's talk about standards. And when we're talking about vaccine credentials, we're talking about a health standard, not a travel standard. Actually, in the language that the EU just released, we loved it, right? Because it basically said vaccine credentials should be developed primarily for medical purposes. This is, again, people don't need a vaccination to get on an airplane. They need vaccinations because it's their vaccination. It's part of their health record, right? So we've, the momentum around the Smart Health Card standard, which is the standard vaccine credentials that we've worked to help catalyze with partners like Microsoft and Epic and Cerner and Oracle and Salesforce and Mayo Clinic and Mass General Brigham and a whole cohort of the leading players in U.S. healthcare. Is exactly that kind of a standard, but it's a standard developed by and for the healthcare system, not the travel. Now, it absolutely needs to be. So the first, and many of the key participants in that standards group are very involved in the World Health Organization's efforts to develop a standard around vaccine credentials. So you absolutely need to align around standards, but to be clear, it's a health standard. It's not a travel standard. So that's the first thing. And I think, yesterday, on Tuesday at the White House, in the White House COVID-19 briefing, Andy Slavitt, who was the former administrator of CMS, who's one of the key leaders of the White House task force, spoke exactly to this point from the White House podium asked about vaccine passports and standards, and signaled the importance of key principles that the government really believes in: open, free, available not just digitally but on paper, and spoke about nonprofit coalitions working with private sectors to develop these kinds of standards. So, and again, the announcement we'll make at the end of the session, I think, will further signal the momentum. So that's the standard that is being adopted by the sort of healthcare ecosystem, and that is absolutely critical. I think the other thing, and this is why, again, it's easy to sort of think about, oh, there are all these apps. That's sort of like, I just don't think about it that way. I think that's the wrong way to think about it. You absolutely need standards. You need a common trust network, which is, if you think about what it really is, it's a registry of trusted data sources that all the apps can use. It's not just about Common Pass. It's separated. And this is, the thing we've been developing in the World Economic Forum. So all of, that becomes a common registry, both of individual data sources, like a LabCorp, like a Mayo Clinic, or a national, a national registry, like, Israel has created their Green Pass. That becomes one trusted source. Israel's, Green Pass becomes the government of Israel becomes a trusted source in that construct. So you need standards, you need this kind of a registry. With that, then you can, have lots of wallet apps, right? I mean, not just the travel apps. You can have, Apple Health, Apple Wallet, Google Wallet. There are lots of digital wallets. And so anyway, so that's how we start to think. So I think it makes all the sense in the world to collaborate. But I think that, again, with standards that are grounded in health, based on a framework and a registry of trusted health data sources, and then, then all of a sudden you can really scale. So we also have recently announced partnerships with Clear, you saw, with Amadeus. Yeah. We're super excited about Amadeus, right? Because we've been working with airlines like United and JetBlue and Cathay and Lufthansa and so forth. But obviously what's exciting about Amadeus is they're obviously integrated into about, the sort of departure control and, check-in systems, about 150 airlines. They're now, integrating into our API so that this Common Pass experience of, hey, Paul wants to board a flight to Aruba, is he Common Pass cleared? That can be integrated into the digital experiences and the online experiences of all those airlines. But rather, for us having to do it airline by airline, working with partners like Amadeus gives us the ability to scale it very broadly across the whole ecosystem.
So you bring up a good point, just sort of about scaling across the whole ecosystem, and then apps. There's a lot of concerns out there that as travel starts to restart, especially business travel, it's going to add complexity to have all these vaccination certificates. Even when there is a standard. One thing that jumped out to me today is the launch with JetBlue is people still need to download the Common Pass app. So in theory, a traveler is going to have their JetBlue app, and then they're going to have their Common Pass app. Maybe they're going to have the Apple Wallet too to show their boarding pass. Why isn't there the integration there, or do you think that integration is coming on something like that? It's
coming. Stay tuned, right? I mean, obviously this is where you start, right? But ultimately, what you'll see Common Pass is effectively API. We're as I said, we're already testing APIs. We're integrated with Aruba's API. We're testing APIs with some of our airline partners, through partners like Clear, like Amadeus, where Common Pass ultimately, if you think about what Common Pass is, it's not there's an app representation of it, but fundamentally, it is a platform that is applying a rules engine and giving a thumbs up, thumbs down, right? That's all it really is. It says, Paul wants to go to Aruba. What are Aruba's rules? Hey, Paul, prove to me that you have a test certificate or vaccination record that meets the rules, and I will then give you a thumbs up, thumbs down. And the benefit of that is, reality is JetBlue and all the airlines, none of them want to be in the business of handling health data, right? They don't want to look at it. They just want to know, has Paul met the rules? Right. And same with hotels, we're now starting to work with hotels, with concert venues, with all sorts of other, destinations cruise lines are the same challenge. Right. The last thing in the world they want to do is actually be handling personal health information. They just want to know yes, no. So to answer your question, right now it's an app, but ultimately going forward, you're going to see it embedded in other digital experiences where effectively it just represents hey, has this person satisfied the health screening rules that are related to, basically my venue, my airline, my country.
Right. So that's you make an interesting point there, because I want to bring up an audience poll we conducted that sort of talks about when people think they are going to be using using these apps to travel. So, it seems that most people think they're going to be using it by the third quarter, a plurality of people. But if you're saying that this is going to be integrated into the systems, I mean, maybe we will be using this, but we won't know necessarily. I mean, what can your thoughts? I mean,
you'll still know. It's not like something that's just totally under the covers, because ultimately, you think about what Common Pass represents. It's like, oh, Common Pass is the thing that helps me, get my data and prove my status without having to hand over my data. Like, right. If you're uploading your data, your lab test to an airline app, I mean, and that's the perception of it, then again, that's not a perception that people want to create. So what Common Pass really is the safe place that lets me effectively pull in my health information, prove that I've met the requirements without having it handing it over to the airline or the border authority. The other thing that, there's a question in chat on how Common Pass went over countries that may be more protective of their data, e.g. China. Fantastic question. One of the things that's been really fascinating, I said at the outset, we started the Commons Project 2.5 years ago because we just believed there were certain problems that require really scalable digital solutions, and that existing institutions didn't exist to solve for them. That was the whole idea, is there are these common, almost sort of public utilities that need to exist that fall in between. And you don't want a big tech company to do them. You don't want a startup, because startups will either fail or get bought by a big tech company. Governments, and of course, we had no idea that that COVID would emerge. But in some ways, the problem we're solving for, no airline can do it, no government can do it. I mean, like the Chinese government can't solve this problem by itself, because ultimately people from China want to go other places. One of our partners is Trip.com. They've been a great partner in helping. They're keen to get travel coming, restarted coming in and out of China. But the reality is no country can do this by themselves, because this is fundamentally about interoperability. Right. And so really the whole reason that the Commons Project exists as this nonprofit public trust that can actually build and operate technology is to be able to build these common utilities that everyone knows needs to exist, but don't fit squarely under one institution. And so we're, Ned, earlier you asked, you mentioned Cathay, and obviously they're very focused on, enabling flying out of Hong Kong. And so we're right now very actively engaged. Hong Kong has something called the Hong Kong Travel Pass for domestic use within Hong Kong. And we are, so we're obviously working very actively, but it's this fascinating problem that no existing entity can actually do this by themselves, right? Because It's not a travel problem. It's not just, it's this problem that exists in this sort of in-between space between countries, between governments, between industries. And that's why
it sounds a lot like the banking industry, and they have a collective called Swift that the banks fund, but essentially operates like the tubes that connect the banks and do transfers. It's not governmental. It's sits between all the different organizations.
Correct. The one thing I point out, though, and again, obviously, IATA is a travel pass. This isn't an airline problem. This is about land borders. This is about sea borders. This is a healthcare problem, right? So there is no one industry. I mean, you're right. It's a very good analogy with Swift, but that was just the banks. That's a banking problem. This is this sort of cross-sectoral problem for which there's no pre-existing entity, and it's not a one industry problem. It's a cross-industry and cross-border problem.
Right, and that's a good pivot into. You've got an announcement that you want to make, but these digital health passports apply in a lot more places. I was listening to NPR the other day, and they were talking about Israel's using their green pass for gyms and movie theaters, and that's sort of they're encouraging people to get vaccines, but it's the same idea. They're starting to have to show essentially a digital health verification to go see a movie. But yeah, would you like to talk a bit about you guys have an announcement that's sort of outside the travel space?
Yeah, we do. I guess it's embargoed for another 3 minutes, so we're right up. I think we're close enough to be able to announce that Walmart, which is one of the major partners of the U.S. government through the CDC, the Federal Vaccine Program, is vaccinating their customers at over 1,000 stores across the country, both Walmart and Sam's Club stores. And so they are, we're announcing today that Walmart is going to be implementing the smart health card standard that we've been developing under the vaccine credential initiative. so that customers who are vaccinated at Walmart will be able to get a digital copy of their vaccination record, be able to pull it into Common Pass and Common Health and other apps. We're also working, as you know, with Clear and so forth. But this is really exciting. First, because again, we've all seen, the ridiculous sort of status quo where people are getting those little white, CDC paper cards with, chicken scrawl handwriting on them that are not verifiable and hard to trust. So this is the first major vaccine distributor who's committing to this open standard, very consistent with the White House statement from Tuesday, to be implementing this digital standard for a secure, verifiable vaccine credential.
I wonder, is this something that you could stick in, say, your Apple Wallet or your Google Wallet, kind of like I do my boarding pass or my lounge card or something?
So think about two different things. One, there is the certificate itself of a vaccination, right? I got a dose of Moderna's vaccine at Walmart, for example. That's the record of the vaccine, and that's the standard that we're developing under the Smart Health Card specification that I spoke about.
Okay.
But then the common, and so you can pull it into the Common Pass app, into the Common Health app, into your Apple Health app, whatever. What Common Pass is then doing is saying, okay, do you meet the rules to fly to Aruba? Generating another certificate, which isn't the health certificate. It's actually the Ned satisfied the rules to fly to Aruba today. That is another certificate, that you can also pull into your GPay app, for example, your Google Pay wallet or your Apple Wallet or whatever. So just want to clarify, there's the Smart Health Card, which is the representation of the actual health information.
Okay.
And there is the Common Pass certificate, which is you satisfy the rules to go to Aruba today.
Definitely. Well, excellent. Well, Paul, I think we have to wrap it up here. So thank you so much for talking about Common Pass and this emerging world of digital health passports. It seems like these are going to become a norm for travel and maybe for just going to the gym and going to see a movie in the very near future. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this world develops, evolves, and see things expand beyond Aruba. Anyway, thank you again, Paul.
Thanks so much.